Okay, thank you. Let's move on to number 3. When you make a motion, if you would say your name and say, Tom Rickard, I make a motion, and then when you make the second, include your name just so it's documented on the recording.
Sure.
I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the March 11th, 2020 meeting. I need a first.
So moved, Heather Mullen.
Heather makes a motion. We need a second.
Tom Rickard, second.
Angela Manning, second.
Tom Rickard, second. That the minutes are approved for the March 11th, 2020 meeting.
Okay.
Now let's move on to number 4, which is the 2020 UW. It should be the 2022 UWP committee meeting schedule. Angela sent out a memo earlier. Angela, if you want to just do like a 60-second review of what was in that, and then we'll move on to our proposals.
Sure, absolutely. Hello, everyone. At your place, or at least online, you should have access to a memo. I believe we call it the FY22 UWP budget process. And in the memo is just an outline for discussion for us to talk about the program in light of some changes. One material change that IDOT would like for us to make this fiscal year. And that change is to move our budget process up by 2 months. So last year, I don't know if you recall, we had to submit the UWP document to IDOT by May 1st. They're requesting it for the 22 fiscal year that we move it up to April 1st. And in fiscal year 2023, the goal is to align it with the date of February 14th, I believe, in which all the other NPOs submit their agreements, their budgets to IDOT. So this is kind of an incremental process. This is year number 2. And so with that movement of moving the budget up to April 1st, which means we have to have it in their hands on April 1st, requires us to push back the budget of about 2 months. I believe included in your materials was 2 proposed outlines, and I don't know if Tom wants to talk about that, but this was put on the agenda for the purpose of having a conversation with everyone about the implications of moving up the budget by 2 months. So unless you want me to say more, Tom, I can stop.
Real quickly,
No,
Angela and Tom, real quickly, we have to actually take roll call before we do any sort of movement on taking action on anything. So can we do that real quick? I'll start. I'm Dan Olson. I'm from CMAP.
Tom Kelso, IDOT. Bill Benea from CDOT's on the phone, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Hi, Tom. Good afternoon, everyone.
Christine Bader from CTA.
Here.
Mayor Williams, representing Council of Mayors.
Here. Here.
Tom Rickard, representing the counties.
Here.
Holly Waters, representing Metro.
Here.
Tom Radak, representing Pace.
I'm here.
And Heather, representing RTA.
Present.
And I know Angela and John Donover. Angela, yes.
I got downgraded to alternate somehow, but I'm here, Angela Manning.
Are you a voting member? Angela, are you a voting member?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay. Just to help with Angela's memo, internally, it had nothing to do with any of the state's MPOs. We kind of made a mistake this year that if all our agreements would have been in place on July 1st, it would have saved us quite a bit of state money. We don't know what the impact is yet, but by not having the agreements in place, it cost us some money. At this point, the CMAP operations agreement is fully executed. The competitive agreement still is not executed. By moving up to April, it'll give us plenty of time to get everything executed by July 1st just in case there is another freaky incident, it doesn't cost us to beat our heads on the table. With that, let's go ahead and look at the 2 time schedule proposals for next year. Dan, do you want to explain them to us and tell us what the difference is on them?
Sure, and I think what I'll do is I will pull them up, and just bear with me as I sort of, still get used to this. I'll pull them up on my screen and share it with everybody, and then we can walk through them and then open it up for discussion after that. Does that work? Thumbs up?
That's correct.
Okay, hold on just a second. I will share that. And apologize again for the lawnmower outside. All right. I'm so happy to have 2 screens now. At the beginning of quarantine, I did not. And so I don't know how we would do this without that. But okay, so the first one I'm going to show you is so these are options. Again, we put these forward just to have stuff to react to, and we can talk about them after I show it. I'll show the one that is with competitive first. And now I'm going to start sharing my screen so that you can see that. So you should all be able to see my second screen, and you can see this would be the schedule in FY21, which is our FY22 planning year going forward. We plan to meet on October 14th at 1 p.m. The main focus of that meeting will be the approval of the FY22 UWP process. As compared to this meeting, which is just the schedule, we're just agreeing to the schedule at this meeting. The next meeting we usually go through, I think you'll remember there's a memo where we outline what the sort of foundation of all the incoming calls for proposals will be for the year. And given that that's not super long of a process, I also want to start including more completed project presentations. So that's what we'd be doing at our October meeting. This year, given the memo that we released, we were proposing that the call for proposals would be released on November 2nd, and then we would have them due on November 25th. This is right before the Thanksgiving holiday. We would then have a meeting to discuss the proposals on December 9th, and folks could present on them. And then we would have all the rankings and all the scoring due on December 23rd of 2020. And then again, in keeping with moving up this schedule, we'd be meeting then in January to adopt the FY22 program. And then we would then in the month of February, that would go to the coordinating committee and the transportation committee. And then in March, the CMAP board would adopt on March 10th, and the MPO policy committee would adopt on March 11th. We'd look to then have that final draft of the UWP document, sort of tightening everything up between March 11th and then, as IDOT has expressed, by April 1st. So that's the first sort of one. I want to basically bring up then, if we didn't do a competitive program, what the schedule would look like. So sort of the same thing for October 14th, where we just approved the process, focusing mostly then, without a competitive, it would be just on the core, what's to be included in the proposals. On November 2nd, we would also do a call for proposal release. But this time, instead of having a few meetings to judge the competitive, we'd be giving you more time to develop your core proposals and submit them by December 9th. We would have a meeting to just go over that on December 17th, those core proposals, and folks can sort of run through if they've expanded them or what they're going to do for the next fiscal year. We would then, again, same sort of schedule, meet on January 13th at 1 p.m. to adopt the program. Again, that would then go through the other committees, the coordinating and the transportation committee, with final approval by the board on March 10th, and then the MPO policy committee on March 11th. So those are sort of the 2 options. I think you should have access to them. I'm going to turn off my screen now. You should have access to them through the website where we posted the materials, but let me know if you want to bring these up again. So.
All right. After Dan has explained them, does anybody have any questions or?
Can I jump in, Tom, for a second and just add a little bit more context to why we're recommending these revised schedules? I think that might be helpful, in addition to the fact that it's driven by the timeline, if I can. So in addition to just the fact that we have to reduce our timeline by 2 months, kind of the thought, and we wanted to have a discussion specifically about the competitive program, is because we know typically proposals are due at the end of January, and you know, most of the agencies spend from the beginning of the fiscal year until that time thinking about what competitive projects they want to submit for that fiscal year. In light of the fact that this is a very unusual year and we are moving it up, where the process would start October 1st, the thought was that maybe it would be a little challenging to put forth competitive proposals this fiscal year. And that maybe for some of the agencies, there was a greater demand to focus on operating needs in light of COVID. So that was one thought process that kind of was driving the two different timelines. Also, just a recent conversation with IDOT, they really would like for us to look at the 5-year agreements and figure out a way collectively on how we can reduce the number of years associated with those agreements. Right now, we have projects starting year 2, year 3 into a 5-year program. And so the goal is to see if we can get these projects ramped up sooner versus later. If we need to revisit how we fund those projects. Also look at just the selection process and criteria that we use in general to select for projects. So the one thought was that we would use this fiscal year to rethink how we are administering the competitive program. If we are awarding projects this year, the goal will be for people to work on completing those projects, but it would not be under the new umbrella we come up with this fiscal year. So that was just some food for thought that was hopefully clear in the memo. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Tom for questions.
Right. Committee members, what are your thoughts on these two proposals?
This is Tom Rickert. I'm okay with the without the competitive. I think that when we look, I'm trying to remember, correct me if I'm wrong, Angela, but I think it was what, less than $2 million, or did we have more available in the competitive side? I thought it was like 1.8 million or something.
For
I
which
think last year was
fiscal
only-
year? Because
I
yeah,
think it was
every year
800,000.
it's gone down.
I think it was like 875,000 last year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it'd be a smart move to focus, especially with what's going on. It'd be a good idea to focus on the various things that you mentioned, Angela.
Any other committee members' thoughts?
This is Heather from the Mullins for the RTA. I'd actually like to argue the opposite of Tom. I think that it's probably even more important that we continue having the competitive program, particularly with COVID going on. I think there's going to be some different approaches and different planning needs that come up because of this, particularly as we're trying to figure out how to move forward from a transit perspective. Coming out of COVID, I think the competitive funding might be helpful towards that. And I think we really want to focus on looking at projects that can be looked at on performance-based approach. And you don't necessarily get that with the more the core funding there. You know, love to hear what everyone else is thinking on this as well.
I know CTA was interested in having just some more time to understand what the effects of this would be. I don't know if there's any irreparable harm done to your timeline if we were able to table this vote to October's meeting, just so we could go back and really look at how it would affect things on our end.
Thanks, Christina.
I think October's a reasonable timeline. I think we could still, I mean, the timeline is the timeline, so it would probably just impact the amount of, if there's a decision to proceed with the competitive program, it would really impact there, because there would be a tighter timeline for everyone to think about proposals and work up the numbers, work up the scope and get it in. So To the operating budget, I don't see any impact. It would be more to the competitive.
If we do table it, what effect will that have on those people that want to put in a competitive proposal, not knowing until October 14th that they need to even start preparing one? Because you're losing another 30 days to come up with your scope and your stuff.
I mean,
Where-
that's what my comment was, that it would put the crunch on those who are interested in submitting competitive proposals. So they would lose time, yes.
Any other thoughts?
This is Holly from Metro. You know, I sort of have the same feeling as Tom. It's a unique year, and we don't have a lot of time to put together a competitive proposal, and it's a big budget year, and I just think that we might be better off just doing the core proposals this year.
Yeah, another thing to keep in mind for those people that are going to put in corporate or the competitive proposals, there will be another call for SPR projects in March or April of next year, which a lot of you have had some really good projects funded under that, which has helped reduce the dependence on the competitive the last couple of years. That's one of the other little benefits of if we move this up and we include competitive, those that don't get funding will know by the time the SPR call comes out that you didn't get funded under the competitive program.
And Tom, I was going to mention the
Anyone
SBR
else?
program as well. You know, the competitive program through CMAP has been dwindling fairly significantly the last several years. I know some of you folks have been on the board for some time, Tom Rickard and others. You know, we used to be dealing with, you know, 5 million plus, and we used to be able to run a robust competition. It's just not the case anymore. We're selecting just a couple, you know, and then kind of relying on the SPR program to kind of pick us up. And it might just be more strategic from the get-go is to prepare us more for the SPR program than that continually draining and dwindling PL program. Because realistically, I don't see the region getting flush with a competitive UWP program and millions and millions of dollars anytime soon. And that's, you know, the FAST Act does expire this year. Obviously, we don't know what's replacing it. But just reading the tea leaves, that there's no reason to believe that metropolitan planning is going to get an influx of funding or share of funding of the federal program this next time around. Just as I don't even see it on the radar. So with that said, this regular UWP process, I think it would be wise to go through and look at how we select projects, look at how we prioritize projects. You've heard from myself, you've heard from FTA for years. We kind of respect the categories you've placed as core and competitive. To us, there is no difference. Obviously, you're competing for competitive funds, but anything that's paid for by UWP funds, whether it's competitive or core, is eligible activities and activities that is the responsibility of the MPO. MPO being all you folks and not just the CMAP staff. So I think it might be wise to kind of take a step back, kind of relook at how program those funds, consider those funds, because realistically we're going to be forced to probably relook at how we do business anyway as funds continue to get tighter. And again, there is a fund source through the SBR program that does seem like it's an area where some of these competitive and these good studies could be accomplished. I just think it'd be much wiser to start kind of planning and shifting the process towards that focus as opposed to continuing to fight over what's getting to be a smaller and smaller pie every year.
Thanks, John. Any other comments on the proposals?
Hi, Tom. This is Philip Benea. I just wanted to just make the point that between now and October, it'd be nice to see from CMAP how the UWP committee plays a role in revamping the competitive program. I mean, I would assume that we would play a role. If there's any additional thoughts in the process of how that would partake, that would be good to know. And then also a quick question, in terms of the core budget increases, is that something that we should determine per jurisdiction or agency, or is there sort of a process to that? Is there any thoughts from CMAP on that?
Been thinking about it, haven't nailed down a solid methodology, but the one that comes to mind would be predicated on knowing what the earmark for fiscal year 22 is, and kind of what we do now, where we look at what everyone's requesting in terms of increase in their core, and just seeing what's the most equitable way to distribute an increase, keeping in line that we have an earmark is what comes to mind. That just seems to make sense, but it's not etched in stone by any means, and definitely would welcome feedback on that.
Okay.
Angela, with the FAST Act still pending, the only thing I think I would be safe to say is that we'll have at least what we had this year. There probably will be an increase, but with the way 2020 is going, who knows what's going to happen. Hopefully by October 14th, we'll have a solid number for that.
Okay. But that's, you know, if there was a decision to proceed with just core funding, that's the methodology that comes to mind. What is the earmark? What is everyone requesting in terms of an increase in the core funding? And how can we, distribute that equitably amongst all the partners is what comes to mind.
Okay, sounds good. I would just quickly say that, City would welcome this process in terms of for FY22. I think as everyone knows, City has a massive budget deficit, so any increase in our core budget would be greatly appreciated on our end. So just kind of welcome the process, see how it goes.
Thanks, Phil. Any other comments?
Just one question I had, and I don't remember. I could look, but I probably wouldn't find it enough. But Heather was kind of supporting the competitive. I was wondering, does RTA receive any core funding at this point? I know they kind of rejected it for several years running there. But does the RTA receive any core funding at this point?
We had in the past, probably about 5 years ago we did, but we haven't in recent years, no.
Okay.
Yeah. Last year, John, I show CMAP, CDOT, Council of Mayors, CTA, Metro PACE, and DuPage County getting core funding.
Okay.
Okay. So at this time, I'll receive motions in one of three, whoever, and I'm going to be Switzerland here. One for schedule, the first schedule Dan presented. This, the second proposal Dan with the competitive. And the third one would be to table it till October 14th.
Motion to table till October 14th.
Christine has made a motion to table. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Heather seconds that. And we'll do a roll call on that then. You want me to do it, Dan, or you want to?
Yeah, well, why don't you do it? I'm going to mark it down though.
Okay, Phil Benea.
Oh, sorry.
And this is to table till October 14th.
Seeing that there might be some other agencies that need to think about this, I'll say aye.
Christina, you're probably a yay, right?
Yay.
You vote on your own motion. Mayor Williams,
Yes. Yes.
Tom Rickert,
Yes.
Holly Waters,
Yes.
yes. Tom Radak,
Yes.
Heather Tabbert Mullins,
Yes.
Angela Manning Hardeman.
Well, I'm going to go on record, I'm tabling because once again, the impact is really to the competitive. It just shortens their time, so I'm okay with tabling.
Well, that unanimously passes. I will try to get us a solid number for October 14th. We may even send it out before if Angela wants to do that. At this point, let's move on to 5.0, which is the third and fourth quarter reports.
Sure, and
Angela, it's all you.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I usually try to cover this, I think, unless Angela, you have something. But so basically, I'm just going to share my screen again so you guys can see, and I'll just go over the fourth quarter reports because those are the most recent. Here we go, sharing. So you can probably see here, this is basically as of quarter four, and we revised these tables a few months ago or a few quarters ago. So you can see, looking at this, you know, this last year ending on 6/30, we basically used up the remainder of our FY16 competitive funds, and you can see basically everyone's done a pretty good job of expending them. So we're almost at 99% of that. And then over the course, you know, here we're looking at 2017, we're almost caught up, but that has another year to go before it expires. 2018, we're doing pretty well too, on at about 92%. And then as we get closer to 19 and 20, you know, there's still some projects that are not started yet. I will probably be getting in touch with you saying, hey, where are we at with those if they haven't. But one of the things, if you guys just take a look at this, as always, get in touch with me if you have any discrepancies or stuff you want to talk about. One of the things I wanted to remind folks for when they're sending expenditure reports, that they please just submit the expenditure of the total federal and local match that has been spent on a project. Not if it includes any budget from other sources that are non-UWP, you don't have to send that. It actually sort of confuses me in the process. There's a lot of times where you'll have spent more on the budget than you were given through the contract. So if you can just make sure, if you have staff or anybody filling that in, that they can just report on the UWP and the local match that's been spent, it will greatly help. Also, for the next meeting for October 14th, we just finished a year with projects. So I'm actually looking, and I'll probably again ask for volunteers to get in touch with me. I want to just thank RTA and CDOT today for or CTA, sorry, I can't remember who's on the agenda. It is, I believe, sorry. Today we have CDOT and RTA, sorry about that. I'm gonna ask other volunteers. We have a bunch of projects ending. We have a number of county projects ending. The Lake County Paratransit Project, the Kane County Long Range Transportation Project. I believe there was also a McHenry County Transit Plan update that was completed. Metra, the origin destination survey, and then possibly also just checking in with our local planning program here at CMAP. So I might be getting in touch with you. If you do want to show off what you guys have been working on, please get in touch with me in the next week or so we can put that on the October meeting. We usually stick to 2 presentations. So that's it from my end. So.
Does anybody have any questions for Dan? Dan, go ahead and proceed with your 2 presentations.
All right, and this will again test my skills. So the first one we have up is the CDOT multimodal crash analysis study. And I'm going to turn that over to Jackie. So if you can just give me a second. We practiced this morning, so hopefully it will go well. And I am going to make presenter. So Jackie, it's probably coming your way, and once you get situated, feel free to start. And we're usually keeping these at around 10 to 15 minutes and then opening it up for questions at the end. So.
All right. I will attempt to share the presentation.
Okay.
And can everyone see the screen with the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Great. All right. Hi, I'm Jackie Henriksen, and I'm a transportation planner at Civil Tech Engineering, and I was a consultant project manager on the City of Chicago's Department of Transportation's multimodal crash analysis study. Also joining us is my colleague, Josie Willman, who was an analyst on the project, and also here is the CDOT lead, Jason Biernot. So I'm going to provide an overview of what this project involved and how it fit into the overall City of Chicago's Vision Zero efforts. All right. The project came about as a result of the City of Chicago's Vision Zero policy, which is a commitment and approach to eliminating all traffic-related deaths and serious injuries. It involves planning, programming, design, and policy initiatives to reach this goal. The city developed a Vision Zero action plan in 2017 that outlined strategies for achieving these goals with a timeline and commitments. One strategy involved collecting and using data to prioritize city resources. To further this data-driven approach, in this project, we applied descriptive statistics and predictive modeling to help the city make better informed design and policy decisions to reduce crashes in the future. The team brought to the table involved a multidisciplinary group of planners, engineers, and data scientists. The Chicago Department of Public Health, as well as the police department, also provided input on how other departments utilize crash data. It began as an initiative of the Chicago Department of Transportation with support and maintenance by the Department of Innovation and Technology. And Civil Tech and our consulting partners provided project management, as well as transportation, crash, data science, and GIS expertise. So the city previously created citywide crash reports for pedestrians and bicyclists. The multimodal crash study included both pedestrian and bicycle crashes, as well as automobile crashes. The previous reports were created in 2011 and 2012. And there was a gap since the last reports because they are time-consuming to create and can't be updated on an annual basis. However, in 5 years, a lot can change in the transportation network. So a component of this project was intended to help automate the process of evaluating citywide safety with new crash data. As part of this study, we set up a framework for the city to use a data science approach to better understand the factors that can lead to crashes. This included a predictive crash model. The end goal was to create a model that identified road segments most at risk for having serious crashes. The model results could be viewed in a web-based application that can be updated with future years of crash data. And to build this predictive model, the team used a machine learning approach in Python, which is a coding program that can be used as a data science modeling platform. Python has a library of statistical models to which you can fit data you have available to make predictive results for the future. We looked at a lot of different kinds of data sets, including 135 variables, in which we used 68 in the model. Here is an example of a data science workflow, which I will use to frame the following steps we took in the project. First, you begin with a project understanding, which is the question you're asking. And then you gather data, explore the data, create a predictive model, and then input the results of the analysis into an application or other visualizations. Then you determine how the results can be used to better understand the problem and inform decisions. And then finally, you circle back to the project understanding to see if your question or problem has been settled, or if a point in the process needs to be revisited. We're illustrating it as a circle here because it is continuous and isn't always chronological. For example, after completing some predictive modeling, you might want to consider adding more data to the model, which might involve going back a few steps and cleaning the data. Also, now that we have finished the project, the model can be used as a framework for future models and refitted each year. At that point, the project understanding will need to be revisited to determine what has changed and if the model needs to be adjusted or there are other new data sets to consider. The project understanding is when you consider what the problem is and that you're trying to solve, and any background research and information that you should consider before beginning the next stages of the process. A good project understanding makes for a better model in the long run and can save you time in knowing what data to consider. For the multimodal craft study, this first involved the project team understanding Chicago's goals and past planning efforts for Vision Zero. In 2017, Chicago developed an action plan, and in 2018, the city further delineated corridor goals in the High Craft Corridor Framework Plan. We spent a considerable amount of time completing literature reviews to understand what other Vision Zero cities have done before and how crash analyses have been conducted in the past. We did a lit review of 16 Vision Zero city crash studies and reviewed 33 papers and other resources on crash and predictive modeling in the traffic and engineering and data science research communities. We looked at common and innovative analysis methods and common variables that were associated with either more or less crashes. In general, we found that most of the crash reports identified high crash locations to target safety improvements, mentioned how the analysis could be used to find low-hanging fruit design countermeasures. For example, San Francisco had a countermeasure model, cost model, identified crash causes and types, and compared across locations and affected populations. Most of these reports did not involve predictive modeling. Rather, they generally took a historical look back at the data. However, Seattle included an estimation of future deaths and injuries involving crashes by 2030. Findings from the modeling highlighted that it is important to understand factors associated with increased exposure to severe injuries, including fatalities, not only the number of crashes. And it also highlighted including an exposure variable in the modeling. We also conducted user interviews with individuals within CDOT, including a design and crash analysis engineer, signal timing engineer, in-house traffic and design review consultants, and managers of the pedestrian and bike project development and streetscaping project development. And we conducted interviews with other city departments, including a data science from the Department of Innovation and Technology, a traffic data sergeant from the Chicago Police Department, and an epidemiologist from the Public Health Department. All of these individuals at some point use or have a deep understanding of crash data. The next step is data acquisition, and this can often be a lengthy process. This graphic here doesn't really do it justice because it's typically the biggest wedge in the pie. The data for a model can come from varying sources and take varying timeframes to request and receive. We considered a lot of data in various qualities and considered which data sets to gather to save time, machine space, and future cleaning efforts. All of the data sets that we included are either open data or can be acquired at no cost. Some of the data sets considered are more traditional engineering variables that are known to predict crashes, such as traffic and roadway geometry, and other variables are more non-traditional in a predictive crash model, such as land use, demographics, and even holidays. And we gathered and looked at city, county, state, and federal data. So some of the main data sources that we determined as usable in the model included the IDOT Highway Information System roadway data, 311 maintenance data, average annual daily traffic, annual crash reports, weather data, and holidays. Once we had the data, we had to perform various processes to make it usable in the model. This cleaning and formatting stage is called extract, transform, and load. The data came in varying shapes and sizes. The crash data is a point file with latitude and longitude. However, what the results of the model would be applied to, the roadway network, was a line file. Some data sets are also line files, but of varying lengths, such as bus route data, and others are point files, such as potholes, and polygons, like census data. At this stage, we considered how and if the data could be manipulated and joined to the subject roadway network, while still maintaining meaningful information for the model. This stage also involved judging on the completeness of the data and whether it made sense to include in the model. For example, data sets with too many errors were thrown out at this stage, or data sets that were incomplete. All of the previous stages, acquisition and cleaning, can often take longer than the actual process of creating a model. If the data that goes into a model is incomplete or bad quality, it won't tell the story you're wanting it to tell. The next stage is feature engineering, which involves further understanding the data story before modeling. This stage involved creating variables based on the raw data sets by pulling out key components. At this stage, we determined if any of the raw data sets could provide significance to the model, but involved further calculations to do so. An example of the feature engineering involved calculating the number of 311 reports in the current month as an estimate. And next was the modeling stage. At this stage, we tried varying combinations of data sets with varying kinds of models. For this project, we gathered over 100 data sets, but we didn't expect all of them to be in the final predictive model. And not to get too wonky, but for those who are interested, the logistic regression model with lasso regularization was selected as a primary modeling framework due to its relative unbiased calculation of probabilities. The next stage involves determining how the results of the analysis are going to be used. This stage almost always involves visualizing the data in a compelling and useful format, other than just a data table with predictive scores. We illustrated the results of both the exploratory descriptive statistics analysis and the predictive modeling analysis in the multimodal crash analysis study final report and in a web-based platform. In addition to the predictive statistics, we also conducted a descriptive analysis of citywide 5-year crash data provided by the Illinois Department of Transportation. The purpose of this analysis was to analyze citywide crash trends, which can be used to better understand policy decisions and cultural attitudes around crashes. The map on the left shows citywide hotspots, which can help find locations for targeted improvements. Also, looking at 5-year citywide trends can help better understand disparities, such as seen on the charts on the right. The chart in the upper right shows that pedestrians represent a small sliver of the overall crash counts, which is the pink color in the top bar, but a large percentage of the fatal crashes, shown in the bottom bar. Or to consider the data in another way, the chart in the bottom right shows the probability that a fatal crash involves a pedestrian. The citywide crash data trends can also help to better understand driver behaviors involved in crashes. However, almost half of the recorded crashes had a primary cause identified as unable to determine or not applicable, which highlights a challenge to properly understand and analyze actual primary causes of crashes. However, of the crashes with an identified cause, the most common cause was failing to yield right-of-way. The chart on the left shows crashes by month and time of day. And as you can see, the heaviest concentration of crashes happens 3 to 7 p.m. in late spring and early summer. This can help to better understand when crashes are occurring and if it's weather related. And then the chart on the right shows Vision Zero benchmark goals in comparison to the actual averages. This can be used to better understand the progress being made. We also looked at before and after data to see how crash numbers change with the installation of pedestrian and bike facilities. In 2012, 55th Street from Cottage Grove Avenue to Dorchester Avenue was a location for a road diet and barrier-protected bike lanes. This area spans across the Hyde Park neighborhood. The map on the right shows crash hotspots along the corridors in the 5 years before the installation of the road diet and the 5 years after. As you can see, crashes reduced at key locations. The findings of the analysis was that the number of crashes significantly decreased for all modes. The infographic on the left communicates the reduction of crashes and the most common crash causes before and after implementation of the design. For example, pedestrian and bicycle injury crashes decreased by about 50%. As part of the Vision Zero policy, the city identified Vision Zero high crash corridors and high crash community areas. These are located in underserved communities that are disproportionately impacted by serious crashes. We conducted an analysis in each of these community areas to look at historical crash trends, and considering crash causes and times can help determine initiatives in these areas to reduce crashes. We also applied the results of the predictive model to look at the number of street segments that were high risk within those community areas. The results of the predictive model can be viewed by city planners, engineers, and other users on a web-based platform. The users can zoom into different parts of the city to see roadways at a higher risk of crashes. We looked at strategies that Vision Zero peer cities around the country were doing to reduce traffic fatalities, including education, encouragement, enforcement, engineering, policy, equity, funding, and evaluation initiatives. All of these tools together can help target resources to roadways most critically in need of design interventions. The end goal of this project was to help roadway designers who work with limited time and transportation funding sources to target safety improvements and work towards the Vision Zero goals. And the research provided a better understanding of the uses and needs of data within the city, and the model provides a framework that can be built upon as data sets and goals are updated and evolved in the future. And that is all I have. Are there any questions or comments?
Hi, this is Jason with CDOT. I just want to thank Jackie, Josie, and the Civil Tech team. I think they did a fantastic job with this project, and the city learned a lot through the process, particularly with the prototype planning application. That was kind of a new kind of forward type of project for us, and we learned a lot from it and the value of data. And now, because of this project, we have additional data information that we can use through many different channels, such as communicating with the public, communicating certain designs to our friends at IDOT, and why certain design interventions are so important, not just for bicyclists and pedestrians, but it can also reduce crashes overall. So we all have goals to reduce crashes, and data within this report helps underpin the work that we do. So it's a very interesting project, and again, the Civil Tech team did a really great job.
Any other questions for Jackie? Go ahead.
You want to introduce the next speaker?
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. Appreciate it. So I think next we have RTA is going to present on the South Shore Corridor Study. I think Heather was going to briefly just say a few words, and then we'll turn it over to Michael Horsting. But I'm going to real quickly make him the presenter. So Heather, if you want to unmute, and Michael, if you want to unmute, you can go ahead then.
Yeah, well, you get that all set up. Just want to let everyone know that we're giving a presentation on the South Shore Corridor Study that we completed using UWP funding. That was completed, I believe, earlier this year, late last year, in coordination with the City of Chicago Department of Planning and Development. This was on the 75th and 79th Street corridors. I'll let Mike get into more detail on that, but we have Michael Horsting from our staff who managed that project from the RTA side, and I'm going to hand it over to him to give the presentation today.
Yeah, thanks, Heather, and hello, everybody. Good afternoon to you all. Just here to share some of the process and the highlights and the recommendations that came out of the South Shore corridor study, as Heather mentioned. Try to advance my slides here. Bear with me just a second. There we go. So the study, as Heather mentioned, really focused on the 79th Street and 75th Street corridors between Stony Island Avenue and Lake Michigan in the South Shore neighborhood. And it really created a blueprint for ways to improve transit connectivity in the area, ways to target new development near key transit nodes, and really create more places for people in the neighborhood to live and work near the many transit services in the area. Just some quick context, the neighborhood is home to many community assets already, such as the South Shore Cultural Center, Rainbow Beach, many others. There's great transit service in the study area, including commuter rail and CTA bus. Two items of note. One, there's a significant spending gap in the neighborhood, meaning area residents are leaving the neighborhood to shop and to spend their dollars. But then also the housing market is relatively stable in the South Shore neighborhood. There's a broad range of housing types. However, it does have an older housing stock, so it doesn't really offer many of the modern housing amenities that people are looking for today. Here's a quick map of the study area showing the two corridors and a 1-block buffer on each side of those, each side of the two corridors, as well as transit services in the study area, including the 79th Street bus, which is CTA's highest performing route, the CTA's first BRT corridor, the Jeffrey Jump going north and south throughout the middle of the study area, and then the two metro stations along South Exchange Avenue. This transportation context and specifically key transit nodes were really the basis and the focus of the entire study and the recommendations that came forward. 5 key goals really were identified from the beginning. The first really was to strengthen transit usage in the neighborhood, make it safer for neighborhood residents to access those transit services, and then support existing businesses along the corridors, strengthen the retail environment, and then finally retain and attract new investment and new in retail and in housing. With any project through the community planning program, community engagement is key and is a focus to the study. Our community engagement efforts on this study were robust and really ensured that the process was driven by the residents of the South Shore neighborhood as well as the business owners. The first public meeting was May of last year. It attracted over 110 people, and during that meeting, we were able to gather resident needs, understand the neighborhood assets and challenges, as well as what priorities are for people living in the community. We did supplement that meeting with an online survey asking similar questions, many of the same questions, which garnered over 300 responses. We then developed a series of 10 recommendations eventually after doing some analysis and took them back to the public in September of last year. And that's really where we workshopped those ideas to make sure we're headed in the right direction and then made adjustments as necessary after that. And then finally, we presented final recommendations to the public in February of this year, so the late winter, just to confirm that we got everything right, talk to the residents about prioritization, as well as strategies to implement the recommendations that were going forward. The study really followed just the standard planning process that included the components that you see here. The community engagement, of course, supplemented with understanding existing conditions and doing analysis of certain topics, including transportation, but also retail and housing markets. And all these activities finally coming together to develop plan recommendations. But I want to quickly walk through some of the analysis that was completed. First was identifying neighborhood assets. I mentioned earlier, the South Shore is a community with many assets and opportunities that can be leveraged to position these two corridors for future success. And so you can see here some of those assets we documented, including educational institutions, parks, civic institutions, and we look for concentrations of these assets to help us form a base for future recommendations. We also looked at the transportation context along these corridors. While we didn't spend too much time looking at general traffic, it is important to understand the high volume of car trips along 79th Street as opposed to 75th Street. But we did examine the broader transportation context in the study area, looking at how metro stations formed key nodes to the east, as well as to the bus routes previously mentioned. We included bike routes and divvy stations, and then overlaying all these modes to really help us understand how they might play into each other and where key transportation nodes exist to serve as a framework for shaping some of the recommendations of the plan. And through this analysis, we really started to get an idea of how to organize these corridors into 3 different ways or 3 different zones. There are a number of amenities along the lakefront, including parks and waterfront with quick access by rail along Exchange Avenue. There's a concentration of education opportunities along Jeffrey that bring students, teachers, faculty to this part of the study area every day. So providing opportunities to capture those folks and try to support businesses in those areas. And then there are a number of cultural assets centered on Stony Island, including the Avalon Regal Theater, the Fiesta Gate Studio, and further to the north, the Future Obama Center and the Museum of Science and Industry, both of which attract not only the residents of the South Shore area, South Shore neighborhood, but also people traveling through the South Shore from points south to get to those 2 destinations. So Stony Island really could be positioned as an arts and culture corridor that we could build from. Looking at the housing market, it's relatively stable, as I mentioned before, although values and rents really haven't yet fully recovered from 2004 and have since been impacted this year, of course, by COVID. There are low vacancy rates, which is great for all the housing types. And there is some evidence of recent increased investor interest in many of the rental buildings in the area, especially those closer to the lakefront and Exchange Boulevard. But again, the housing stock is older and there is room for some new housing stock with newer amenities and newer floor plans, creating more modern housing options to further attract residents in the future. Looking at the business context, there are challenges in these corridors in terms of retail. The nature of retail has changed over the recent years. People's shopping habits have changed. As previously mentioned, the South Shore neighborhood has about a $200 million spending gap, with local dollars being spent outside of the neighborhood every year. Some people shopping in adjacent neighborhoods or in the South Shore suburbs, even Northwest Indiana. So that combined with with the storefront vacancy rates, sometimes pushing 60% in some cases, there's a good bit of opportunity for new ideas to recapture some of those dollars spent, bringing them back into the neighborhood, especially with food and drink establishments. We heard from the residents that they really want to see new options for sit-down dining, for cafes, coffee shops, but also some neighborhood retail services such as dry cleaning as an example. So there are opportunities to reoccupy some of the many vacant storefronts along 75th and 79th, and for some infill development in the neighborhood. So this brings us to the plan recommendations. For this plan, we're calling them 10 ideas for action. These ideas focus on what the community can be empowered to do itself to position the corridors for future success in the light of limited city resources. These 10 ideas are very strategic. They recognize that the city and the community can't do everything everywhere all at once. So it builds off of these areas of strength, those areas being those transit nodes. But most importantly, the ideas will act as a blueprint for the residents, for the city, but also for partnering agencies and even for future developers who will see there is a plan for what the residents want to see in their neighborhood. So I'll quickly walk through them. The first idea for action is really super high level, and that is to have a clear framework of where to focus initial activities, initial development and improvements. The 3 key nodes shown here is where you see where there is existing transit services in the included with a concentration of business activity that's currently existed. So this doesn't preclude some of the smaller nodes such as 75th and Jeffrey or 79th and Jeffrey, but again, it really serves as a framework of where to steer initial investments in the short term. So the second idea for action is to advance community-led arts and culture initiatives. There's a great arts community in the South Shore, as well as great public murals along 79th Street. So can these be leveraged in the short term to work with the arts community and install additional public art or establish a mural program, for example? This idea also includes the installation of temporary public realm improvements, such as the example shown in this center photo here, to advance a more pedestrian-friendly environment along these corridors and really increase pedestrian visibility. And then finally, how to activate underutilized spaces in the area with some temporary uses in the short term and making these corridors more attractive. In a similar vein, action item number 3 is to advance community-led greening and open space in the areas. While there aren't too many city-owned vacant parcels along these corridors, there are some. So how can the city advance urban greening initiatives or make stormwater management improvements? And if there's an interest, start a community garden or urban farming program. The fourth idea for action along the corridors is to market the opportunities that already exist at these key nodes. So this idea is really to promote some of the vacant storefronts to developers, to the business community, to fill some of the spending gaps that we heard about with sit-down dining or cafes and coffee shops. And promoting the areas closest to transit nodes as the first places to attract new business. The fifth idea for action is the first of the midterm. So the first 4 are really kind of short-term things to really think about and pursue. But this fifth one is more of a midterm item and goes back again to the arts and culture, marketing the area as an arts district, thereby bringing more people to the area and showcasing what the South Shore has to offer. This idea includes the promotion of pop-up events, especially in vacant spaces, as well as programming culture events at key locations in the neighborhood, such as libraries and youth centers. The sixth idea for action is making improvements to the public realm, especially upgrades at key transit nodes. Examples of this improvement, of this recommendation could include working with CDOT to make sidewalk repairs or streetlight repairs and improve the general pedestrian and bicyclist infrastructure along the 2 corridors. This item could also include wayfinding signage, which is really lacking in the area. One thing we learned, for example, is if you're on 79th Street at the western corner of Exchange Avenue looking east, you can't even see that there's a metro station right around the corner. So signage would really greatly help people find that direction and know where those transit stations are, but also other transportation options such as biking, divvy stations, for example. And then finally, this item also recommends working with transit partners to make upgrades at bus stops, to add bus shelters or benches, and also at rail stations to further improve the visibility and the comfort of accessing the train stations in the area. The seventh idea for action is encouraging the renovation and then reactivation of buildings and storefronts at these key nodes. So this includes working with developers, the business owners, property owners to encourage renovation of existing storefronts, and then further encouraging private residential development and reuse of the buildings in the area. This also includes working with the numerous nonprofits in the area to help support the renovation of key buildings in the South Shore neighborhood. The eighth idea for action is the first one of the longer term activities. And so after making great strides with ideas 1 through 7 in promoting the reuse of current vacant spaces, this action item is finding ways to attract infill development at key nodes. So this could be attracting new residential development with those modern amenities and floor plans, et cetera, that people are looking for. South Shore is also an aging neighborhood, so encouraging new senior housing to help older residents stay in the neighborhood and age in place. And then finally, working to attract new mixed-use development to really improve the vibrancy of these 3 key nodes in the neighborhood. So for any neighborhood retail to thrive, we really need that critical mass of residents to support new businesses. The 9th idea for action is activating these full corridors in a way that builds from the previous work done at the key nodes. So once there's momentum from working in the key nodes, and after focusing on those areas, there will be steam to move forward and activate the full corridors in between the nodes. So one opportunity here is to permanently convert, convert some remaining vacant lots to small pocket parks, and open green space for residents in the long term. It's sorely needed outside of Rosenblum Park and Rainbow Beach. The South Shore neighborhood really doesn't have many opportunities for outdoor neighborhood recreation or green space. So there's need for more. So that's one idea. Recognizing that having wall-to-wall commercial space, especially along 79th Street, simply isn't feasible in this modern retail world. The idea here also includes converting any remaining vacant storefronts to non-commercial uses, including residential, especially along 75th Street where there's lower traffic volumes. And then finally, the 10th idea for action is planning for long-term capital investments in the neighborhood, such as upgrading major intersections or introducing comprehensive streetscape and upgrading pedestrian crossings throughout the 2 corridors to make them safer for pedestrians to use. There's also an opportunity here to do something more creative, such as with the very complicated intersection at Stony Island and 79th, where there's also the Chicago Skyway flyover ramps that really complicate that area and make it very uncomfortable for pedestrian use. So is there an opportunity here for artistic lighting or public art in the underpass to make the area more comfortable, more inviting, and perhaps even serve as a gateway to the South Shore neighborhood and to Chicago's South Side? So finally, an implementation strategy was developed to identify implementation leads for each of these activities, as well as some potential funding sources to accomplish these ideas for action. The city's key funding source, at least for now, will be their Invest Southwest initiative, of which 79th Street and the South Shore neighborhood is one of 10 priority corridors. The city will also coordinate with other agencies, as I mentioned before, as well as nonprofits to prioritize initiatives, and we'll also work with property owners to advance targeted storefront vacant parcel opportunities. So again, here's just an overview and a summary of those 10 ideas for action, each laid out again in a logical order. Some activities already taken place, which is exciting to report, with the allocation of funding from the city's Neighborhood Opportunity Fund for 2 projects that will rehabilitate vacant storefronts along 79th Street. One for rehab and build out of a new co-working space, and the other for renovation and reuse of the vacant building for a new architecture studio. So things are already happening in this corridor in the study area. So the RTA will continue to further monitor those implementation activities for other advancements, and certainly will support the city with any implementation activities in areas where we're able to do so. So that's the end of my presentation on this project. It was great to partner with everyone. Some of the folks here on the call actually participated, including CDOT and CTA as well. So happy to answer any questions if I can.
Thank you, Michael. Does anybody have any questions for Michael? Thanks, Michael.
I do, it's
Heather.
Angela.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Angela.
I just had a quick question. That was a great presentation. I was just curious, in your research, like what was the top, you talked about community input and engagement. What were the top 2 priorities for the community residents at large?
Yeah, good question. So the community residents, what really resonated out of there was finding opportunities to further promote access to the transit services. And some of that is just coming from better signage, but also from more safe opportunities to access transit. So they really wanted to see that being promoted throughout their community. But then also, as I mentioned, is trying to fill that spending gap again. So that was probably number 2 in terms of community priorities, was how to find ways to bring back some of those services and some of the retail opportunities, especially for dining and drinking establishments in their neighborhood. So those 2, I would say, were probably the 2 biggest items that we were hearing from the residents.
Hey, Michael, this is
Thank you,
Tom.
Mike.
Did you guys do that in-house?
No, we didn't. So we hired a consultant. SOM was the lead, and then there were a number of subs that were included as part of that. So, but the city DPD as well as RTA staff managed the work on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you. That was very good. Any other questions for Michael? Okay, real quick.
I can chime in to say it was very good too. I was very impressed with that. I'm taking some of the ideas back to my board as we try to do some things around here too. That was very good. Kept me glued the whole time.
Anybody else for Michael? Okay, real quick. When we get to public comment, Aaron wants to talk for a minute on number 7.0. Our next meeting is October 14th. We're going to vote on all those 2 options. Keep in mind, whichever way you go is fine, but there will be an SPR call in the spring. And if there's not a competitive, it will save those locals that would get it the match money for at least this year. And I don't think there's a government budget in the country that's flush with money at this point in time. So with that, we'll see you all on October 14th. And now we're going to go to public comment. And Aaron, it's all yours.
Well, thanks. I recognize that I'm not exactly the public on this committee meeting, but I got booted. I'm in the office and my computer has decided to run a whole bunch of updates in the background. So, I understand that we've tabled the discussion on, increasing core funding for this year. Instead of, having a competitive program was the discussion item that Angela and Dan brought forward at the beginning of the meeting. But I just wanted to make a few points here. So one of the things that we've been thinking about too, is just making sure that our agencies have the resources that they need to fund the staff that they need to do the planning work that happens on an annual basis here. So like was mentioned earlier, I think the competitive pot was about $850,000 this past year. They're 5-year agreements. We're also hearing from FHWA that they really want us to reconsider that 5-year time frame to make sure that we're making the best use of public funds. But I think one of the things that Heather said that was critically important here that perked my ears up is that, increasing core this year would allow us, and doing away with the competitive program this year alone, would allow us to take some time with this committee to go back and really revise what a good, solid, competitive program means for this region and how it helps us accomplish our goals. So I think that was one of the things that I wanted to make sure that you were aware of as we were thinking through, what makes the most sense to both address sort of this need to reduce those 5-year contracts to something that's more manageable and faster, to make sure that we're being accountable with our federal funds in this region, but also that balances sort of the needs of where we are today, and given the fact that we don't know where we are going to be in the next 6 months with COVID. So in the interim, I appreciate IDOT's support for us continuing to utilize SPR funds like we haven't in new ways, and especially that local match component on those competitive projects. I think many of the projects that we've seen come through our core competitive funds that we have are also eligible for those SPR funds as well. So again, there's lots of opportunity, I think, for us to thoughtfully consider what a good program might look like moving forward. So between now and October, we'll be putting together some additional details for you all for consideration. And once we get the mark from IDOT, we can certainly share with everyone what that would mean for increasing in terms of the core programs funding, and have a more solid proposal for your all discussion, for your October discussion. So just again, I wanted to reemphasize a few of those points there before we got off the call.
Thanks, Aaron, and hopefully you'll be with us next month when we call. I apologize, that's my dog. He thinks I lost my job and he's telling me to go get one right every day at 2 o'clock. Is there any other public comment at this time? With that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Tom Rickert, motion to adjourn.
We need a second.
Angela Manning, CMAP second.
We're just going to do this orally. All in favor of adjourning, yay.
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 I think that's 10. Thank you. If anybody has any questions between now and October, I'm sure Angela or Aaron will be glad to answer them for you. Otherwise, everybody keep busy and be safe. Thank you.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Hey, Jane. Hi.
Dan.
Thank you for helping and giving me that feeling of backup in case anything happened. So I had recorded that, and I'm not sure, do I just leave and then does it give me the option to
I
do
think
something?
it generally records the GoToMeeting website. So when you then log back into GoToMeeting on the website, you should see the recording there.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I don't think GoToMeeting records locally to your desktop.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure I've been to the website, but I will figure that out. So I'm just
Just
gonna
at the
I'm
schedule
gonna
the meeting.
I'm gonna just press stop recording right now because
Yeah.
this part doesn't matter anyways.